We experimented with no firing. We're going to commit to you. We're going to develop you. We're going to coach you. You can leave whenever you want.
That's Greg Kunkel, co-founder of NextJump, a company so good at developing its own people, they built an invite-only academy to teach everybody else, training leaders from the military to the Fortune 500.
I've read that you have no lying, no hiding, no faking. How does it work?
That term is almost a higher bar of transparency. There's a real cost to not being truthful with each other. It is crucial for high performance, especially when things are changing. It's hard work. When we get in a stressful situation, one that's really hard, our worst can come out. And we'll say like the situation was terrible, but if you look at it a different way, that's who you really are. That's what showed up. That's my habit. Now that I've seen it, I can work on that.
Why do you think that corporate America hasn't adopted this like so many other organizations have? Greg, it's so great to be with you here today. Thank you for making the time to speak with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's exciting to be here, Anita.
Well, I've been following your journey and the NextJump journey for so long, and I've been really inspired around all of the work that you all have done. And I'm curious if you can take us back to the time when you were with the team in the co-founding process, and how did you decide that you would not have a people or HR department?
Oh, gosh. So that was an evolution. I think when we started, there were 4 of us. We then brought on interns. We grew to 200. At one point, we went from 200 down to 6. So we had an up and down journey.
Just to give everybody a timeline of like when that was, or how many years from 0 to 4 to 200 to 6.
I joined in 1998. So we went through the .com piece. We brought on investors, brought on business leaders, and barely survived. Learned a ton of lessons. We kind of grew, we took on an investor from Google. We hired all these kind of engineers, built an engineering culture, kind of transformed our culture. We had an HR department. We had senior HR from investment banks, very professional kind of HR. And one of the pieces about kind of our culture was that it really fell on senior leadership. And you have your job of running the business, you have a job of kind of running the people. And we had a big part of our culture was around coaching. How do we develop people? It's been one of our kind of philosophies along the way.
Was there something, what made you decide that you were going to have that early on?
Really was one of our kind of our founders, Charlie Kim. It was just something, he's comes from a background where he was always did it. He would teach kind of our interns when we had no money. He'd teach them how to present better after work. And so it was part of his DNA, and it kind of transformed into the company. And so one of the things we started to think about, there was a frustration on the senior leadership side of this kind of culture piece. It's really falling on our shoulders. And we were working kind of the hardest, and we thought, what would it look like if we used kind of HR, the people side, as practice ground to kind of train everybody? And we started this journey where it took a little bit, but we slowly started to make everybody's job the people side. So we'd have engineers that would have product, but they might do the performance evaluation process. They might do kind of feedback. They might do recruiting. So we slowly kind of turned everybody into what eventually became known as kind of like an everyone culture.
And then at that point, did you eliminate the HR positions, or were they there building the frameworks for everybody to operate inside of
We would have some HR folks that did payroll and maybe more of the tactical side.
Sure.
But I think in terms of what would be traditionally thought of kind of from the HR standpoint, we would have, whether it's, evaluations, really almost recruiting, kind of, hiring, almost all of it was done by as everybody's kind of second job.
I hear the operators and like people professionals saying, well, how do they have time to do that? Even engineers, when I've worked in large engineering organizations, a lot of my engineering leaders would say, well, they don't have time to do that. They have to write code. Today it's different, but then, they're like, they don't have time to do all of the people stuff. And we would play with the structure so they wouldn't have to do the people stuff, but then they still had to deliver the work. How did you work through those constraints?
So maybe taking a step back, when I kind of think of culture, I think it's kind of the environment you set, a mix of expectations, of habits and rituals, senior leadership and kind of leadership in terms of how they're role modeling their actions, what you tolerate. And so it was a big part was how do you shape the environment so that, yes, you'd be able to give people time. You'd have kind of expectations on it. We would set the why to do that. And in some ways, it was fun for some. It was also, in many ways, it brought on kind of new challenges. But we were very transparent when we hired people. This was what our culture was like and the environment and expectations. So it took a while, but that was eventually became the norm.
If you were able to go back in time and talk to yourself then with all that you know today, is there any advice you'd give to yourself at that time?
Wow, it's a great question. I think one of the things that I've really learned is, and I still learn it, I think even learning it today, is to really take a step back and kind of think, like, what do I want? Mm-hmm. What do I think is the right thing to do? And be able to kind of expose that truth, to others and have more difficult conversations. And I think it's easier to not admit, I don't really know, or I'm confused, or this may not work. What are my fears on something? And so it's just easier to follow or easier to do things of which maybe other companies do or what you kind of hear. And so I think I've had to learn with a lot of work over time to tap into what do I authentically think, what do I authentically want to do, and expose that, get feedback for it. And that was something I had to learn.
It is so insightful because I feel like especially in this era, we're inundated with information all the time. I used to say if I could have $1 for every person that told me I should have an organization and run it like Google, I wouldn't be working anymore. And everybody's like, be like so-and-so, be like so-and-so. Do you think there would have been a way you could have gotten to that authenticity faster?
I think we've always been a kind of, and I give kind of my other partners a lot of credit for being authentic and doing what we kind of want to do. I think there's an element around culture, to your point around, being like Google, is that it can be very situational to what your mission is. And yeah, I've worked with kind of entrepreneurs that are more VC backed, and they're trying to get to a place to kind of sell an organization. That type of culture may have a different need than someone that's kind of vested. And we've had the fortune of working with leaders across nonprofits, to sports, to education, to military, and different missions may need a different kind of culture. And so to be able to situationally build one that's authentic towards your mission is often where people can get into trouble by trying to build something that they're not.
Yeah. So if I have to kind of break it down into a framework for people, first, understand what your founder wants, right? Are you building for VC? Are you building for sale? Are you building for lifetime? And then what is the mission that aligns with your product? And then building a culture that aligns for you to make that a reality.
And I think also the environment today, and I think it's changed, and I think some of the things we've been working at in some ways have started to match it, but there's so much more uncertainty. There's so much more pace of change. There's so much tools now that didn't even exist 5, 10, 15 years ago that enable and maybe lessen some of the limiting factors that any individual or small teams or even bigger teams have to go make the influence or the impact that they want. And so, but that comes with different human skills, and I would argue different environments that need to be set for culture. And so we can maybe talk a little bit more on that, but my point on that is even for us that have had a very strong culture, our organization today looks quite different than it did even pre-COVID. And so while we learn lessons and build on lessons, if you're not kind of reinventing kind of yourself as a leader and your kind of your own awareness and your abilities, let alone how that translates into kind of the culture for the team, then it may not be the right mission for the situation right now.
Yeah, very true. So that's insightful. What have you done to rebuild yourself in the team in this evolution of change?
Yeah, that's a great question. So One, so maybe a little bit of context. We had a very strong in-office culture. So we had, I think, 4 different offices. We did a ton of coaching, feedback. We had rituals that were very around. We had gyms in the office and all this kind of culture. And COVID really shifted that. And we went, like everyone else, we went through that and we really debated, do we want, what type of culture do we want kind of going forward? And we ended up both experimenting and kind of shifting to a model where we have a small kind of team in the office full time, more coaching, more responsibility, more in many ways accountability, and work from home and more kind of contractors, collaborators that have the flexibility they want. But we didn't do the hybrid. And I know other organizations that's been a fit for them, but for us, we kind of experimented. And that was a huge challenge from our culture that we had before into what does it look like to have kind of smaller teams that are very transparent, very working kind of on themselves, more responsibility. And, now I have people all over the world on my team. I have setups in terms of, someone that works on my team, but that works within one of our client offices. Those sorts of setups wouldn't have existed before. So that brings both opportunities, but also new challenges.
Sure. Are there things that you've done to operationalize that so that it can work effectively?
We're a very transparent culture. So I think it's been one of the pieces I think we've been known for. Yeah. And I think part of that transparency is being able to be open about what the challenges are, to give feedback loops, to be open and recognizing kind of you need to iterate. And I think that has helped us a lot because I think oftentimes we want, especially in more uncertain when times are changing, we want more certainty. And the hard part for that is very easy to be like, okay, here's the new system before it's necessarily been tested, before it's been kind of iterated on and gotten kind of feedback and tried. And, I've learned a ton of lessons over the time of we set so many limits ourselves, which are often related to our fears, our predictions of how things might turn out. Yeah. And just as humans, we're not the best predictors. And so being able to kind of try that, but also allow for that kind of messiness, that uncertainty, the difficulty that comes with that process, and trying to set, both for yourself and for others, more embracing of that versus fear of it.
Yeah, so let's talk about transparency, because I feel like that's a loaded word. And in a bunch of surveys, everybody would come back and say, be more transparent, be more transparent. Mm-hmm. I've read that you have no lying, no hiding, no faking. How does it work in a way that instills confidence for the future and doesn't create fear through the uncertainty?
I think there's one of the pieces that we talk about a lot is that it's important to understand and to keep working at and chipping out where you want to go and what do you want to, and you can iterate on that. But it's maybe even more important to understand the kind of the truth of where you're at now. And that truth can be messy. It's not clear to us. It's uncertain. People have different point of views on that. And so that term, no lying, hiding, faking, was termed by one of our co-CEOs, Megan Messenger, which is almost a higher bar of transparency. Yeah. Because transparency, I could just not say anything, not say what my doubts are, not say I could hide. And you're not saying something, but it's a higher bar than just being kind of transparent. And so I think there's a piece for high performing teams, whether you're in any kind of, it could be sports, it could be military, it could be in education, it could be at work. There's a real cost to not being kind of truthful with each other, open with each other. And that means people may say they want transparency, but there's an element of putting the structure in place to be able to do that, enabling hard conversations, patience and messiness and kind of the human side. It is crucial for high performance, especially when things are changing, but it's hard work.
Is that why you put in place the no firing? And is that still in place? Because I always think, how do I get more transparency? And then I think, well, they're not going to give it to me because they're afraid of repercussion and all these coaching conversations. So if I take away the fear of losing your job, does that work in opening up this line of I'll say anything in the spirit of the mission?
And we've had the fortune of working with, different military groups. And one of the parts that I think they do well that I think sometimes corporate America doesn't do as well, or thinks about it, is there's kind of two levers. You can hire somebody that's already pre-made and into a job description, or you can really develop them. Yeah. And I think for us, we experimented with that no firing. And it was as much for us to kind of push the envelope for, we're going to commit to you. We're going to develop you. We're going to coach you. You can leave whenever you want. Right. But there's a part where it's when you take that lever away, when you get really frustrated with somebody, but yet can't fire them, then you learn to be creative on what are other ways to kind of coach, train, motivate, have more honest conversations. That at the time was something that enabled us to push the envelope.
That's incredible. You shared you have some stories around feedback and how that's played out.
Yeah, well, to share one of the stories, this was back when we had kind of an HR group. We had a program that we called it Top 10. And it was initially designed where everybody could see everybody in the company. They could put a thumb up in a month with a description, and whoever got the most kind of thumbs up in a month would be our top 10 kind of employee.
How would I get a thumbs up? Like, what would I do?
It could be just for you helped somebody else, you did a good job. We really didn't put too many parameters for it.
Was it built around like better you, better me, better us?
So it was part of our, in some ways, kind of to take a step back on that, we talk about our programs and our investments and our people in Better Me, Grow Ourselves. Better You, which could be customers, community, it could be colleagues, and then equals Better Us. And so, the top 10 initially was a way to recognize individuals that were better you. So they were thinking about others besides themselves. And we had this idea to experiment with adding a thumbs down so that it was almost the reverse. You could give candid feedback. Mm-hmm. And we had a very senior HR leader, a lot of experience, almost on his knees, not quite, but almost on his knees, begging to not to put this in.
Yeah.
And because you can't do this, people can't publicly get kind of critical feedback, and people would leave, it would ruin our culture. And one of the things that I found to have worked and we've done is when you experiment to try it 3 times. Once, oftentimes, if it's new, you're not very good at it, you're still learning. 3 times isn't the biggest commitment. If you don't have traction after 3 times, then you can kind of reevaluate. So we decided to try it for 3 months. And it was fascinating. It opened up a whole line of conversation about eggshells, we call them eggshells, or things unspoken within kind of the community that weren't being talked about. And it hurt some people's feelings, but in other cases, it actually led to a much closer organization. And that led us down a path. And one of the pieces I learned is in kind of culture change, how much fear we bring into our predictions. And it's been an awareness for me of when I do that to take, how am I, maybe that level of certainty is an indication that it's more my emotions and my fear, so maybe true, leading me into kind of a level of certainty. I can certainly see with others. And that's a very normal part. But I think some of our ability to kind of innovate and push the envelopes, you kind of have to lean into that and be open that fear may be accurate, but more often than not, it's never an accurate prediction. It's on some kind of wavelength.
It's true. I always say between 2 people, there's your perspective, my perspective, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. And everybody else can look at it through their own lens, and it will be different in every case.
And often and they've done studies on this, for people that predict, it's actually the people that more consistently get it wrong are much more accurate to predict than the people that predict it right. It's very hard to predict how the future will play out. There's so many factors, which is why I think organizations and individuals that put out what they want, they go and experiment, they go and innovate, they iterate, they try things, you learn kind of what is actually going to happen, I would argue, is going to be even more valuable going forward and needed going forward.
You were written up as one of the best companies next to Ray Dalio through Harvard, being a developmentally deliberate organization. Can you share a little bit about what that is and maybe why people watching would want to take on some of these practices in their own organization?
Yeah, we didn't term so Bob Kegan, who's a professor at Harvard in kind of adult psychology, had termed this deliberately developmental organization, which was, and he took a look at firms all across kind of the world. They ended up finding a very handful. It was NextJump and Bridgewater, a financial services company, asking this kind of question of as an organization that has in its heart, in its work, to deliberately development the people that they do. And so they just heard about us. We kind of got to know them, and I think more. There are lots of organizations that across, I would even say, more in the sports, the kind of high performance areas, that's more normal. It's like you have to train people. You have to train people up and kind of develop on them. And there's so many opportunities, even to this notion on what we were talking about a little bit earlier about if you give an engineer, say, kind of an HR, do they have the time? And I think one of our challenges is how do you bend lessons learned in, you could try a new technology, for instance, in building, we built like 50 apps that were just all done within kind of HR. So they would be able to experiment with technology even within kind of the people side. And so there are ways to kind of bend and train that we all have all around us. We just don't often think about that as training.
You know, it's interesting because I've always shared, or was like, I need to build a training program. I'm like, it's in the work. It's what we do every day. We're in the work. We just need to highlight it, that it is this. And why do you think that corporate America still struggles with developing people? Engagement is plummeting. Tenure, retention is all challenged. I just feel like, you know, we turn out humans and now everybody's excited we can rebuild it with bots. And why do you think that corporate America hasn't adopted this like so many successful or other organizations have?
It's a great question. I think, and it's a complicated question, and I think it depends. A few thoughts come to mind. The first one is that there is a lot of urgency. It depends on kind of the organization and, you know, desire for kind of long-term kind of growth, long-term kind of what you kind of want to do. And not all organizations are run by that. They're run with very short-term kind of intentions in mind. And that may not be, in that case, you know, development is an investment and it's an investment over time. And so there's a part where that may not for all organizations be necessarily the primary motivation. So
like back to the original premise, if it's built to sell or turn quickly, it may not be in the best interest, which is important for leaders to recognize.
And I would argue that you know, there's a lot of studies that organizations that do invest in that, I think culture gets challenged over time in the hardest of times.
Yes.
Not necessarily when it's just in the good times. And so that's a part where it's, you know, investment in doing the right thing over time pays off over time. With that said, one of the challenges around development is I do think at the core, individuals have to choose, do they want to develop themselves? Yeah. And do they want to grow? And do they want to be learning? And you can't force that. You can set an environment that has that as an expectation. You can set an environment where the coaching is provided, feedback is provided. But ultimately, you know, one of the lessons that I learned over time early on is I used to spend a lot more of my time with individuals that were struggling. So using kind of an ABC of kind of your kind of the people on your team, I would spend most of my time with the C's. And I was known in some ways as being really good at getting more out of the C's. And today I'm like 180 degrees on that of taking your best and instead of leaving them alone, finding ways to help them grow, help them teach, put them in position where they're actually challenged again. And I think for each of us, we get a challenge, we're successful with it, and it's human nature to want now that to be the new norm, and that's what we do. Yeah. It's hard to get back on your version of the next kind of new bicycle to re-challenge yourselves. And I think that's that can also be something that I think as leaders, we have to ask ourselves first in the mirror, if we're not growing and learning, what can you talk about lessons learned in the last 6 months, 3 months? what is your current thing you're working on? If you can't ask yourself those questions and answer them and share them and teach them, it's hard to expect that from others.
Okay, give us those questions again. They're really good.
So I was just saying, is oftentimes when I found where I'm at my worst in kind of coaching is I'm sharing things 5, 10, 15 years ago versus right now. What are the things I'm learning at? What are the things I'm struggling with? And so there are times I have to take a step back and put myself in the mirror first of, am I sharing the most newer thing where I'm less comfortable explaining? It's harder for me to find the words for it. It's harder for me to explain it. Or am I going to go back to my old story, which might not be situationally what's relevant right now?
But it's an easier script to run.
It's 100% easier script to run. It is an easier script. And so one of the things I've learned just in the last year that was an eye-opening for me was how often my own expectations, I'm more of an optimist. So I'll be excited about a new idea and I want to try it. And invariably new ideas will come with it's harder than I initially hope it is. And you hope it works just kind of easily, but oftentimes it doesn't. And that will lead for me to get frustrated. I'll get frustrated. It might be with people. It might be with the situation. It might be with myself. And then I got my own coaching, which was, wait a minute, kind of like I use kind of a video game analogy of normal mode versus hard mode. And kind of you learn in easy mode, then you go to normal and hard mode. And I was in many ways mislabeling what should be hard mode as kind of normal mode. In my head, I was like, this should be easier, but then it's not easier. But then I was I'm doing that myself. If I go in and this is going to be hard mode, it's going to need iteration and challenges and setbacks, and I'm going to need to be more resilient. My energy, the way I'm handling kind of that feedback as it comes in, I would have a tendency to take really good ideas and get 2 to 3 setbacks and move on to the next new idea. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that's like an example where it's like a bit of an aha of, wait a minute, I'm doing that for myself. My own expectations are dictating my future behavior.
Yeah, it's really, really insightful. So how much of what you're doing is backed through neuroscience? Like I felt so relieved when my coach and I went deep into how my brain was hardwired and knowing that, I forget the number now, but I think your brain serves up millions of thoughts every minute, knowing that I don't have to attach to those thoughts. And I should pick the ones that most perpetuate of what I want to create. So do you bring neuroscience into it in part of your coaching and how you're building these frameworks? Like how do you think about that?
We've been fortunate to meet kind of leaders that are experts in that space. And I think they have kind of words and frameworks that I think have been helpful to kind of incorporate. I think I've been careful in my own piece of hard challenges in the work itself or the experience itself and truly being challenged in ways that you're uncomfortable and putting yourself in uncomfortable positions, I think really exposes kind of like where we're at. Yeah. And one of the things that that I've always kind of loved is turning on its head that oftentimes we'll use, when we get in a stressful situation, one that's really hard, our worst can come out. And we'll say like, that's our worst, like the situation was terrible. And there's an element of truth to it. But if you look at it a different way of that's who you really are, and not in a bad way, not in a judgmental way, but like, that's what showed up. That's my habit. That's what I've built to this part. Yes. Now that I've seen it, I can work on that. So in the next stressful situation, the next challenge, a better version of that's going to happen. And it gives more ownership in terms of like what our ability is to kind of endlessly kind of upgrade ourselves. But oftentimes we'll excuse that of the situation. I'm not really like that of I have more patience. I'm a better listener when the situation's good. But I would argue the litmus test is in the challenge. So to your question on the kind of the neuroscience, I probably come at it from a little bit less, but it's very related in the sense of there's a part of where, endlessly understanding kind of how our brain, it's so complicated, how our emotions are connected to that. There's some just fascinating experts that kind of on the emotions and where that piece, and I think they're all worthy in terms of like having a deeper level of like awareness, understanding, and to bring those conversations into the workplace as opposed to, that's not for here.
Well, it's so fascinating because if you look at all the things we deal with in life, I don't know how we wouldn't bring them into the workplace. And so, how do you look at all of this and still see how it drives performance for Next Jump? So, how do you bring all those things together and still keep people focused on delivery?
One of the things I use this expression, kind of a big M versus little m. Big M being kind of like your bigger mission, and start there. Little m might be our projects, where we're at, kind of our self side. And I think it's very normal to start with, okay, my job this week, we're busy. My job this week, I have this project that's done. I have this part going on for me. And it's easy to kind of show up at any different point with starting with like the little m. And so I've worked at it. I try to train kind of our team is start with the big M, and early in the week, take a step back, zoom out. What's the big M? So if I'm working, say, on a client side, where does that fit in the bigger picture? In the morning, we have a ritual that I work on. I call it visceral drafting. So I take instead of starting with emails, starting with getting into kind of the reactive work, I have a blank piece of paper, just like a writer would. And I don't look at notes. I don't look at anything else. Blank piece of paper. It may be the bigger mission. It may be kind of a bigger project within that, how things fit together. 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes to be able to get my visceral out, put my thinking on the table, helps me sharpen my thinking, understand some of my thinking, make it a little bit less fuzzy. Those rituals bringing into kind of individuals, I think especially with AI and so much more technology, so many more tools in place, I think be able to tap into kind of our own authentic, what do we think? How does it make sense? What are the questions? What are the limiting factors? What do we want to do with all the capabilities that we now have are going to be more important human skills for kind of each of us. Sure. And I think those are the things that you can bake in and have been really effective for me to improve the way I kind of lead and operate.
If you don't understand the value of culture, you're probably in the wrong line of work. I think it's a must-have. If you think of it as a nice-to-have, you need to reprioritize. Your actions as a chief executive are what set the tone for the entire organization, regardless of what you want the people to be. If you have staff that feel like they are comfortable and can be themselves and they can let their guard down, you have more loyal staff. You get better work out of that staff.
Culture doesn't happen by accident here. It's something we have to actively create through connection, engagement, and communication. So giving people the tools and the opportunities to recognize and be recognized is going to make them want to show up as their best selves every day. Staff is our most important resource. It's our most expensive resource. If you're not willing to support the staff you've already invested in, just a little bit to facilitate genuine interaction between each other, to reward them for acknowledging the good work that they do with their peers, you're really missing a lot. There's a direct connection between investing in your culture and the quality of the work that you produce at the other end.
So does everybody at Next Jump do that? Do like the blank paper in the morning?
So I would like more than probably do, but it's a good example where it's. I think people have really struggled with that type of concept and I get it in the sense of you're busy, you've got clients that are calling, you've got deadlines due, you have emails for it, you have your life stuff. It's just very easy to sit within the routines. And I think one of the parts that we've learned on the culture piece is that rituals and behavior and habits are such a lion's share in terms of to be able to make adjustments in it. And so my closest team around me, I basically ask them to do the kind of visceral drafts and to kind of think about it and to expose it and share it and kind of sharpening kind of that thinking. But it's an example right now where it's a current challenge of mine of we're in this transition now where it's people could kind of do their job, but now there are tools that can make their job so much easier. And that begs a very scary question. Well, what would you then do with it? What would you do with your time? What would you do with your energy? What would you be able to service from whatever it is to build something? And if you're in a role where you largely had a very specific function to do, that is changing. And so the rituals need to change with it.
For people that are scared about it, we talked about this a little bit in our pre-dinner last night. What advice would you give for people that are automating so much and don't know how to redirect their minds?
I think recognize the truth of it. And that's a hard part of it. Has the situation changed? What am I doing that's ineffective or that could be improved? And be able to talk about that, recognize that, own that. That's a hard journey for all of us to kind of be able to do that. So I think that helps if you have other kind of colleagues that may be going through difficult things and be able to have that conversation, train together. We try to do a lot of that kind of training as small teams together so you don't feel alone in it.
What kind of training do you do together?
So it could be even in teams of 3 in terms of sharing your kind of visceral drafts. We have groups of small kind of coaching trainings once a week where people come and it'll be more on the development side. So one of the things we found is to kind of normalize. Oftentimes I think coaching can be kind of finger waggy when I'm at my worst, as opposed to normalizing those emotions, those change. Those are hard, and it's how do you increase your resilience through that, not despite of it. And so I think to that point, going back to your kind of question and in terms of that, I think 1, it's recognizing. 2, then there's a part of I think there's an element of that skill set, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs or others that have tried things, there's an element of vulnerability to that. It's a loaded word, maybe not my favorite word, but what I mean by that is be able to put out what you really think, what you kind of want to do. It's a scary feeling. It's a scary feeling of because you can get criticized. You can have people that predict that won't work, and to be able to try it, to be able to kind of iterate on, to stick with it. It's scary. And so to be able to have kind of practice ground that you can go try that and do that, those are skills that I think are going to be more crucially important because, I'm sure everyone has their kind of AI story, but we built a mobile app with 3 people. And so for me, it was just eye-opening of what's possible. That would have been a 30 to 50 person group in terms of what we were able to do in our kind of perks of work business. And that just really changes, and the tools are changing so quickly. It really begs the question of, okay, well, how do we service our customers better? How do we run our operations better? How do we make it more effectively? How can we dream of things that before felt impossible that now are impossible? And those are hard questions.
And thinking about AI and how much more can be developed so quickly, people can view it as hard, but part of what I'm learning from you is it's the lens that you put over the top of it. So it can be viewed as hard, or it can be viewed as really invigorating and as exciting. So at Next Jump, how do you think about gauging that so that the fear doesn't become so big and we can innovate to create better solutions for our customers and our clients?
The way I kind of think about it is, as a leader in the organization, you have to go first. You have to experiment. And when you do it, you also have to share the challenges and the struggles with it, something that I've had to learn and I still struggle with. I'm more the optimist. So, I kind of grew up where you don't necessarily talk about the challenges. But I think that it does a disservice to others because it's real. It's part of what actually happens. With that said, I don't think to me, I've been as invigorated over the past year as any time I've been at Next Jump. And a big part of it is things that felt impossible to me now feel, amazingly possible. So it's an exciting time, and I think people do feed off that energy and believing also in people's endless ability to upgrade if they want to and if they're willing to work at it. So I think then it goes back also to investing in people that are showing progress and changing. And that's not like people aren't linear. So people are constantly, some people grow in kind of bursts and then they stagnate. Others, it takes a while. So to be able to be kind of flexible, even with how you would view a traditional org chart, I would say that looks more like a sport team than a traditional kind of very line, you promote your way up. I suspect that's going to be more of where work goes.
I love that you're bringing up the sports team analogy and that could be the future of the org chart. And so when you say that, I think more of a spider web. Is that the way you're thinking about it? Where we're passing back and forth?
So my prediction, it could be completely off, is that it'll be a collection almost of small teams. So teams that are nimbler, teams that are, can work with each other. So yeah, maybe the spider webs are pretty good. We use kind of a community piece, and that community may be tightly within your team. That could be with collaborators. That could be with partners. So I think the definition of what it looks like for your organization to achieve its mission is just, it's going to look different. Yeah. But I think that just like in any kind of, I'll use a sports analogy, but you go through slumps, and there's times when you need to kind of reset. There are other times when you're kind of on fire. So, but in a traditional kind of organization, if you're at a certain job part here, you either get promoted, you stay, or you get fired. To be able to kind of like shift like this, to take on bigger mission, have a pause on some of the mission stuff, or maybe go to one that's a little less important because you need time to recover. Those aren't necessarily principles that are aligned typically with kind of the corporate side.
I think we're going to get pushed into this conversation because already founders are saying, what's happening between product and engineering? How are we working together? What's happening between customer service and sales? I think our org charts are going to be pushed more than ever in this next phase.
I do think there's a need, an opportunity for those, both individuals and within kind of teams and organizations, to really blend that.
Yeah.
In that, it's never easier to talk to customers. It's never easy for someone like me who's not on the tech side to build product directly that can get released with a code review in a matter of hours.
You're doing that now, though.
Yeah, I'm doing it now. And so to be able to be a product person and build, to be able to, to sell and to be able to talk to customers and be able to understand problems, really the tools are there for almost anybody to do it. But historically, that's, to your point, you have an engineer, you have a product person, you have the salesperson, and those lines are very clear, very siloed. It's not my job. Yet the tools now. And so how do you train individuals to embrace that, accept it, to want that? And that's a challenge in front of us.
For sure. So if we go back to the audience, we're having CEOs watch this, we're having heads of people watch this. If they say, how do we decide if we want to be more developmental? What would be the advice that you would give to go in the direction that Next Jump has gone?
I think it's incredibly empowering to think of two levers versus one. Yeah. And so it's not to say that you can't hire someone that has experience, is a good fit culturally, and can't plug and play and be immediately productive. Having said that, to be able to have confidence, you can grow individuals, maybe they're younger, maybe they're others, into positions that they didn't dream they were capable of before, gives a lot of confidence that you're not stuck with one. And so I would advocate that it's to be able to kind of flex and build programs on both sides for an organization. It's empowering and gives you more leverage.
Are there examples you have where there's still chief people officer, but they're building this way? Is it possible for the role to still exist, or is it just additive and not as useful?
Well, it's interesting because I know one of the questions is kind of maybe I would say my observations of where I think some of the senior leaders, kind of like CEOs and others, if they're delegating kind of the people side to HR, it is an issue. And I think there's a part where we have the biggest impact on the people side. People are a lever. They can absolutely make, data points, feedback of things that may be going wrong that you need to know, innovation. On the same side, I think on the people side and the HR side, I think to be able to understand what the mission is, I work in our Perks of Work business, we sit within kind of benefits. So I work with thousands of kind of HR leaders on that side.
Yeah.
And I've seen a correlation, maybe more qualitatively, of those that come from the business background, whether they were in sales, whether they were in the product side, whether in the marketing side. They're able in many ways to kind of more effectively, I think, communicate and bring in elements that from the people side, our enterprise exists because we have a mission and we're driving it, we're innovating on it, we're growing that business, which enables us to take care of our customers, take care of our people, and to be able to where I think it can sometimes, I've observed, go wrong is when it's an either or.
Yeah, it has to be both.
It is both.
Yeah. And so then how would you advise CEOs that are delegating the function to take it on?
I think just recognize there's a part where that people side's a lever and people are watching you. And so there's a part of ultimately, again, it can depend on where you are situationally. If you're trying to maximize things to kind of go sell,
Sure.
that may be the right call. But I would argue that there's a part of if you're going to really build something and want a high performing organization, then it starts with yourself and your impact and be able to influence as kind of a senior leader, certainly at kind of the head of the group, is being watched more than anybody.
Every day, every day. You've talked a lot about predictability. I read that you kind of built a Moneyball predictor. Is that something you use? How would you look to measurement for people to look across their organization on topics like this?
It's interesting. One of the things we talk about, I certainly was influenced by that book, but one of the things we talk
love that
about,
book.
one of the dangers, I think, of the data analysis piece, I think people got so into the data, making decisions, data-driven decisions. One of the parts that's difficult with that is that when things are changing quite quickly, there's an assumption most data is captured from the past. So you're looking at past kind of data exhaust to predict in the future. And there can be giant lessons in that. But that assumption that it also begs this question that, well, the future is going to be the same as what the situation was in the past. And I would argue that that's increasingly less true. And so I think intuition, be able to have judgment, to be able to kind of take the past data as data points, valid data points, and to be able to think, talk out, debate what those indications might mean, but also how might the situation change in the future? What is the situation change now? And how do you put some of those pieces together? I think is what sometimes can get missed in that data kind of driven decision discussion.
And full circle back to the AI conversation now, right? If we're just relying on AI to tell us what's happening, we have to be able to apply our intuition over the top of those situations.
I think it gets to what do you want to build and what would resonate? What would you like to have happen? AI is just the tools to be able to effectively build that they're amazing.
Yeah, incredible.
I think this isn't just HR. I think it goes for everybody. But the amount of limits we put on ourselves and what we think we can do, it's often unchecked. It's our boss wouldn't let me do that, or I can't do this because of X, and I think there's a part of being able to kind of understand and be more truthful with ourselves of what are these limits that I have narratives on or putting on it, expose it and try to get it challenged, which is where I think a coach can come, is actually challenging and helping you think that may not be true. That may not be true. And I see that a lot in HR. They're waiting in some ways to be told, what is the decision coming down? What is the tool I can use from AI? What I can't do? Yeah. And sometimes it's true, but in many cases I can see how many limits. And I see others that are innovating, they're trying things, they're experimenting. They're also getting promotions. And I think there's badly needs, I think, leaders that are willing to kind of take those risks and to try things. And so I've seen that more up and close with kind of HR leaders I've worked with, of some of the differences, and it'd be the one thing I would hope for is for each of us to kind of recognize some of those limits.
Yeah, what I hear you saying, which is so incredible, and I think it's always been true, but now it's being spotlighted around AI, is that no longer do we have the luxury for somebody to come to us and say, like, Greg, I need you to go do this. The value creation now is saying, I see a problem. I'm going to go and iterate on the possibilities for how that can be solved or delivered. And I'm going to take a chance and deliver it, even though it might be outside of my scope or my runway, and continuously deliver value, even if somebody says, hey, I don't want that right now. And especially, I agree with you in HR, not sitting back and being nobody told me to do that, but to jump ahead and say, I think I can be better here for the organization.
I think that's right. And I think there's a part of, tapping into what would I want to do? What problem what could I solve? And being open that ideally it's like, I love this definition of pride and being proud and creating something that you're proud of.
Yeah.
I do think it starts with yourself. Like if you build something and other people think that's amazing, but you know that like you cut corners, it wasn't something, that's not a good feeling. No. And I've certainly had that. But on the flip side, when you build something you're proud of, but it doesn't resonate with others, that's missing half the equation too. And you ultimately, I think, want to build and strive for building something that does both. And that's just, that's something worthwhile to strive for. It's not easy to do.
It's very difficult. So kind of a corollary, you've talked about making sure where's the business going and we're building a culture to support that. Where am I going on my career path and making sure that I'm doing things that are additive to that vision?
And I think the only part I'd say, even to the career path, I share is to that point of if individuals can start with the bigger mission, whatever that mission might be within their organization, and start there, think about that, allow yourself some space of, well, how am I going to impact that piece for a second? Living in that space, having some uncomfortable, it'll bring up more questions and other pieces. Then coming back to, okay, well, how can I impact that? I think that's, if it's in that sequence and we do that more often, it will be beneficial to both the organization and certainly I think the individual's ability to impact, which if you bring impact to an organization, a team, et cetera, you're going to have more opportunities in your career.
And so inside the Next Jump culture, I can continuously deliver to you. Sometimes it will land and sometimes it won't, but both will be learning opportunities.
Yeah, and I look on exactly. And I look at something I would take, if I had two choices of where to invest in it, I would put more weight on someone that's trying new things. They're developing, they're open-minded on it, even if the outcome's not there yet, than someone that the outcome is there, but they're basically living on what someone else has done. Right. Because I think my future prediction would be that the first individual will grow farther and be able to have a bigger impact in the future.
Definitely, definitely. You love using the word prediction. Am I missing anything inside of that?
No, in the sense of I just think it's very when we make decisions, we are all factoring in predictions in the sense of if you don't think it's going to be a good outcome, then you likely won't take action. So whether I use the word kind of prediction a lot because we're prediction machines as humans. So whether we talk about it or not, we're making predictions. Yeah. And so be able to put those on the table and actually state it more openly, transparently, it enables much more real conversations. Oftentimes we won't, and our prediction will be negative, but we don't really want to say that. And so we'll couch that behind, well, other people would, or we'll be more passive aggressive on that. So I think being able to kind of be more honest with ourselves of good thing, bad thing. Why am I making that prediction? Is it a fear? Is it an emotion? Is it because of an experience I've had? Is that experience the same experience that might be applied to here? To me, it's a very important part of our decision-making kind of process and framework that we're making unintentionally. And if we can be more intentional with it, ultimately we'll be making better decisions.
So coach me through this one. I'm working at an organization. The pattern of my leader is that they're not connected to the mission. They're not able to articulate what the mission is for the team, what the goals are. They're changing very frequently. In this time with AI and rapid development, we're shipping product, releasing it faster, we're changing dates, and it's very chaotic. Where would I start to highlight this and create more streamlined organization around what we're delivering? Because it changes so frequently. I hear this from so many leaders. Everything right now is chaotic. It's changing. I don't know where to start. I'm unclear on what I should do.
So if I were to do that, there's a part of being able to take a step back. And on one hand, I would do the visceral drafting of what would I do in that position? And how does the system work? What is the mission? It would give me probably more respect of how difficult that role probably is and that challenge is. And I think people can feel that. Yeah. If you're going into something where it's like, I'm not responsible for it, you're responsible for it, and I'm just kind of either passive aggressively or giving my advice, I think people can feel it versus ones that have taken some time to sit in that challenge, to understand, here are the complexities, here's the nuances, here's what we've done in the past, here's some of my thinking for what we could do in the future. I think people can feel someone wrestling with that challenge. And so I think a mistake sometimes I've made, I think others will make, is that they're too certain on the action without doing the investment in the thinking in terms of what is the situation and the challenges and the nuances, the limiting factors. And I think then if able to do that, you're going to have a more authentic conversation, but also maybe pick on things where you can create some momentum in that area. And when there's momentum and progress, I've not met a boss, very rarely, that would not notice that and want more of it.
Right.
And so oftentimes it's like you can build trust and engenderment by both understanding where they're coming from, how difficult that is, and then creating momentum. And now you're in a place where they're probably coming to you for advice, thinking, what could I do? Whereas oftentimes it's easier to go the opposite way. I'm not going to do anything myself because you're the issue. And whether I say it or not, you're going to feel a tone a little bit of like certainty around what I think you should do.
Yeah.
And that doesn't go so well.
It doesn't. And then what happens when I feel like I'm giving the feedback to the leader and I don't feel like I'm being heard?
And I look at that it's interesting in terms of kind of feedback. There's a part of like, what's my intention? Is my intention to kind of, fixing them, or are they asking for feedback? So there's a part in there of the situation may differ that. They may be wanting feedback, but then not really. But in some of the cases, maybe they're not even really asking for it. And I'm trying to, state my point. And there just may be more effective ways to go do that. So I think there's being honest with myself, and I'll do it the reverse side. I might have, giving feedback to an employee, I might have my own agenda for what I want, and I'm giving feedback really for that agenda versus for that person. Yeah. And so it's, there's a level of like self-awareness I need of, that's not necessarily going to be the most effective way to both give feedback and get after that mission part.
We were chatting at dinner that really there isn't a company I can think of that is excellent outside of Next Jump at developing people, really intentionally developing people at scale. And so then we have a lot of frontline leaders with no training. And then we have a bunch of early career people looking up saying, well, my leader should tell me. And so it feels to me like there's a lot of spin where we've got new leaders that don't know what to do. We've got early career leaders that know that they need more, but they don't know how to get it. How do we get through this? Like what advice would you have to say, how can organizations get that signal? Because I don't think oftentimes management teams recognize that it's happening.
So it's a complicated question. One I don't know if the best way to answer, but one of the things that comes to mind is this notion of practice ground. And I think when we use this kind of above the waterline, below the waterline, like a boat, it's kind of like if you make a mistake above the waterline, maybe there's a hole in the ship, but the ship is still running. Below the waterline, if you have a mistake and you have a hole in the boat sinks. And so I think there's a part of being able to understand there's value in giving people what would be considered above the waterline initiatives where they have the ability to make a mistake. And I think oftentimes we expect people to like learn just by listening versus learning by making a mistake, challenging them, having a project. And so it's something I've had to learn of having the patience and being more deliberate of like giving them space to do a project that they're going to learn some lessons that by the time they show up in their below the waterline job, they're going to have something, better skill set, better decision making, more experience. And so I think there's a part of that can be a work thing, that could be a home thing. And so that's, I think, from a team standpoint, but I think for us as individuals, we'll often separate those two. And you can learn on a totally side way you interact with family. It could be a project that's not even work related.
They're all
that,
related.
That you can bend towards that and say, I want to work on and it could be a softer skill. It could be my listening skill. It could be my observational skill. It's kind of endless in terms of what you could do. And if you bring that mindset, you'll be fascinated that it can turn up in the mission part when you really need it.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, I have two final questions
Sure.
for you. Is there anything else before we go into the final questions
No.
that you would want to share with our listeners?
No.
Okay. I'm curious. So from our last founder, she has a question for you.
Okay.
Is there a decision or something that happened that really impacted you, that you learned tremendous amount from a situation, really a decision that you made that had tremendous impact?
In a kind of a lesson learned, like a regret standpoint?
Yep.
Yeah, I've shared a few of them on the kind of way, but yeah. So a little bit of my history, I came in from the client side, the client relationship side. I came into our leadership business. Post-COVID, I came back to lead our core business, Perks of Work. And I would say the first year and a half, I think it shaped a little bit of some of the conversation today. But if there's a part I regret, a mistake that I made was I was feeling kind of, in some ways, a bit overwhelmed of, okay, I have all these, running the business and kind of learning how to run all the different parts of the business, the team. I was, you're just busy all the time. And I think I definitely made a mistake of not taking a step back and be like, how do I want to make this business, this product, this service kind of better, uniquely mine? What do I want to bring? That's tapping into me very differently than others. And in a way that I think would be exciting, would be motivating to me and ideally to others, and to be better. And it took me about a year and a half to realize that was a real mistake I was making of kind of running what I thought needed to happen, kind of operationally, following in some ways kind of, this is a 20 plus year business. And I think it was a giant lesson for me to take the step back, even some of what we talked about today of what do you want? How is that shaped? To let your own self, your own kind of authenticity of what motivates you, excites you, what you think would work. There's a piece of it's crucially important, I think, and never even more so perhaps, because it's so easy to build things of, what is going to motivate you, excite you, that you think will work in ways that are better. And so I learned a giant lesson in that.
That's insightful. Thank you for sharing. And it's hard to take a step back and say, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? What do I want out of it? Mm-hmm. Really impactful.
And I think also being able to be like, I am uniquely me and I have other leaders I admire and respect in our company. But in this case here, what do I bring out that's uniquely me, and allowing yourself to be seen? Mm-hmm. I think it's both a scary feeling at times, and it can be hard work at times because we're complicated. But I think it's also, I think it's what we need more of.
Yeah, I do too. Is there a question you would like to ask our next guest?
Question you like ask the next guest? Interesting. Yeah, I would say, I need a second on this one. To me, one of the things that I kind of think about is from a time horizon of 3 months, 1 month, and a week. But even in 3 months, where do you want to be in kind of 3 months? What do you want to kind of accomplish and do and kind of innovate in 3 months? Because sometimes people answer in 5 years or 1 year, but things are changing so quickly.
Yeah.
It's been something that's really helped me to try to sharpen in 3 months in multiple different levers. Maybe it's the team, maybe it's myself, maybe it's the product, maybe it's maybe it's our customer service. In 3 months, it's long enough. It's 13 weeks, but it's not that long. And so there's an element of there's action that needs to be taken along those lines. And so I found it really helpful to think about and kind of sharpen. So I guess I'd be curious if whatever that leader is in kind of that 3 month window.
Okay.
Yeah. Where do they see kind of the next level in 3 months?
I love that you stated that. It's so fascinating to think about with how quickly things are changing, and not to be so far out in our time horizon.
And I think there's a placeholder of kind of what do you want to build and stack it. But I think to me, I found it's been a good iteration for me of that 3-month mark, 13 weeks. It's not next week, it's not even a month, but to really, have your kind of top initiatives of what you want and be able to envision it, see it, and that time frame's been helpful.
Okay, that's great. We'll ask that question.
Okay.
Do you have a culture crush? Somebody that you look up to and you admire?
Yeah, so you asked about this, and I've really been really lucky at Next Jump, and we've just met thousands of leaders from military, sports, business. And so I thought about this. There's an individual, Danielle Morse. She runs a nonprofit called Shared Living Collaborative. And she works with highly autistic people.
Okay.
And she's had this for 2+ decades at this point. And, she's had amazing ups and downs. She's been on the feature story in Rolling Stone for her work that she's done in kind of autism. But largely it's in an environment where there's not a lot of money, there's not a lot of resources.
Yeah.
And she brings, if you kind of she has a farm, she learned that kind of autistic kids respond really well to horses.
Yeah.
She's innovated in crazy ways to take kids that are often in some ways kind of abandoned.
Yeah.
And found out ways to build a high-performing community and culture where she can't pay a lot of money for staff, but the commitment, the community that she's built even within the town to be able to do something. We've learned a lot of lessons from watching kind of her. And often I've worked with organizations that feel they don't have enough resources for culture. And whenever I get asked that, I always think about Danielle of like what she's been able to build herself. Direct feedback, community, a love in some ways, a defined kind of problem, patience, experimentation that I think we've drawn a lot of lessons on. So she would be my culture crush.
Okay, I love that. That makes me, I have one more question based
Yeah,
on
please.
that. What advice would you give then for the leaders that say, I don't have the money to do the things? What I love is what we talked about is the investment you discuss is investment of heart and soul and time. It's not purchased.
I think there's a part of it goes back to that discussion on limiting factors. And, we all have in our head what limiting factors are. And I hear them all the time. Not enough resources, not enough time.
Not enough dollars.
The military will say, well, I don't get to choose who's necessarily, coming into my organization. I have others that will be like, the newest, kind of people coming out of college, they're entitled or whatever it might be. And I look at, and money's in one of those limiting factors. I look at money, it can expand what you're doing, but it rarely solves, it may mask a problem, it may solve a short-term one, but I think it can also limit a lot of creativity.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Well, Greg, thank you so much for spending the time, for teaching us, for sharing your wisdom. We're really grateful.
I really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.